The mystery of Ishmael.
Yes. Now, this is prophetic. This has affected every one of our lives. I mean, to this day, you're talking about news reports, is all linked to a mystery that goes back to the tents of Abraham. And it's amazing. The whole world, the piece of the world hangs on a mystery that happened in this desert dweller tent with these two sons. And it's behind everything from Islam to Muhammad to Osama bin Laden to Yasser Arafat to the threats on America, all the way back to Abraham's tent. I mean, really, every answer is in the Bible. I mean, Bible explains everything. And so we go back to Abraham. Genesis, God gives him the promise, I will give you a son. A great nation will come from you. But as we know, he comes up with an idea. Well, God's not doing it, so you know what? We got to help God out, and that's always a danger sign. We're going to help God out, and you go into the handmaid Hagar, and you'll have a baby through her because I can't have a baby. So he does, and what happens comes out Ishmael. Here's Abraham's firstborn son, Ishmael. Now Ishmael, is there. Now keep in mind, he is there for years before there's anybody else. He is viewed as the heir to Abraham. I mean, when God speaks to Abraham and says, I'm going to do a great thing, what Abraham says is, yes, Ishmael will be the one. So everybody thought it was Ishmael. Everybody thought Ishmael was the one of the promise, including Abraham, Hagar had to have, Sarah had to have. So they thought this was the way. So he's growing up as the one. Now, at one point, God gives a prophecy concerning Ishmael. Now, God promises God will make Ishmael a great nation as well. He'll give him much. But he also says he'll be wild. He also says his sword will be against everybody. His hand will be against everybody. So it's going to be a wild kind of thing going on there with Ishmael. But he's going to be blessed. But the thing is, keep in mind, now here's what happens. Then, all of a sudden, God comes back and says, now, no, you, Sarah, old Sarah, you are going to have a baby. And Sarah laughs, and God says, Sarah, why'd you laugh? And Sarah says, I didn't laugh. He says, no, you did. And the name of the baby is going to be called Laughter because they laughed. So in Hebrew, that's Yitzchak, which is Isaac. So you have Ishmael, and you have Isaac. Now, what happens with this thing? What happens is, because of the conflict between the two sons, it comes to a point where Sarah says, and then God says, no, Abraham, it's okay, it's my will. You're going to have to send away Hagar and Ishmael. Okay, so Hagar and Ishmael go away to the desert. God takes care of them and gives a promise again. He confirms, I'm going to make a great nation. But think of something. We don't usually think about this. Imagine you're Ishmael. Okay, you're Ishmael, and you're growing up as the beloved son of your father, and then all of a sudden comes another child. Now, sibling rivalry is a problem to begin with, but here's another child. Now he's the one. So first of all, what you're going to be feeling, probably jealousy, probably resentful. Then you lose everything. When you're about 13, you lose everything. You lose the birthright. You lose what looks like your inheritance. You lose your father. You lose all that honored position. You lose all that. What is that going to, and he's just becoming a teenager now. What is that going to do to him? What's that going to do to his being? And from him come much of the Arab peoples, as we know. Now, let me just say something, the mystery, who is it today? Now, there's some who say, no, there's no question, from Ishmael came the Ishmaelites. From the Ishmaelites, there's no question that the blood of the Ishmaelites is throughout the Arab world, whether there's also other blood as well. But we have ancient records from the Babylonians, even from the Assyrians, that link up the Ishmaelites with the Arab peoples. We even have records of Arab peoples before Muhammad, before Islam came, where they said, we are the children of Ishmael. Before, Ishmael, when Muhammad came, he said, I'm from Ishmael, we're from Ishmael. So now, no matter what, they've taken up the mantle of Ishmael. But the point is that, number one, the Arab civilization had some great, wonderful things, and I love Arab people, and I love when they get saved. One of my greatest blessings as a Jewish believer is to find an Arab believer who loves the Lord. It's the most wonderful thing in the world. Amen. But there's a mystery going on throughout history. You have the people here, clearly the blood of Ishmael is there among the Arabic world, and the mantle of Ishmael they've taken up. If you read the Quran, it focuses a lot on Ishmael. It says Ishmael is the one. It says Ishmael, not Isaac. It says Abraham offered up Ishmael. It says Ishmael and Hagar, they came to Mecca, and then Ishmael died in Mecca. The whole thing. So you've got this whole Ishmael thing going on, the spirit of Ishmael, all that. Now, but to understand this, what does this reveal? Number one, about what's happening. Number one, God says, I will make a great nation. So God said that way back 4,000 years ago. He's done it. The Arab peoples are one of the most populous peoples in the world, number one. But number two, also, it's telling you from Genesis, from the tents of Abraham, that the destiny of the Arab people is linked to the Jewish people. They're all there together. That's why there's a link between, Arabs and Jews are cousins. You wouldn't know it because the enemy so destroyed this thing, so used it. But in the end, they're going to be back together. In the end, there's a good ending to this. In the end of the story, you have Isaac and Ishmael actually together burying Abraham at the end. That's kind of a foreshadow. But right now, they're linked to Ishmael. But what else do you see? You have among this, you have Ishmael. Think about him. He lost his father. Okay? So what do you have in Islam? You have God has no son. They cannot call God Father. Correct? You cannot. It calls him the merciful. Cannot call God Father. What? Because they lost the father years ago. And it's kind of like saying, well, if we don't have the Father, nobody has a Father. You look at the Temple Mount, what do you see? It says, on the Temple Mount, on that dome, it says, God has no son. So it's so much, so it's going to be against anyone who says, I'm a child of God. God is my daddy. It's going to be against all that. It's going to be against Isaac, going to be against all that. Also, you want to look at all these things. There's a rage in much of this history. In much of not all, but in much of Arabic history, much of Islamic, there's a rage, there's a fear. Why? Because the answer's in Ishmael. Ishmael would have a rage from that time on. He would have an anger from that time on. He'd have a resentment. One of the things about in this, you see this spirit in terrorism. It's a resentment about anybody who has privilege. It's a resentment of anyone who says, I'm loved. It's a resentment against the Jewish people. Why? Why against the Jewish people? Because that's Isaac. So it's Ishmael and Isaac. And it's also about America. Because, first of all, if you're born again, if you're a Christian, your link is through Isaac. Your link is through Isaac. Messiah is the son of the Father. He's the beloved of the Father. So there's going to be a war against that as well. There's going to be a war against America because you have all that together. You have Jew, you have Christian, and you have what looks like blessing. So you've got all that. So therefore, when you have all those factors that are all explained in the tents of Abraham, you've got a spirit that says, I'm the outcast one. So that leads to radicalism. That leads to, I can't get it this way, so I'm going to get it this way. I'm going to get it by the sword. I'm going to get it by, I'm going to take it back. Why is there such a focus on the land of Israel? It's all there in that mystery. Why? Because that was the inheritance of Isaac from Abraham. That's what Ishmael thought should have been his, the land of Israel. Now, the Arab people have much more land, have gigantic areas. They just don't have, but there's a concern about this little land because that's what Ishmael lost in his mind. That's what he lost. It's the land of Israel. What also was the promise? The covenants. All that came from Abraham to Isaac. The covenants, the revelation of God, that came through Isaac, came through Israel. So what did Ishmael do? Well, we're going to have our own revelation. We're going to have our own. We're going to have our own religion. We're going to have and we're going to take back everything, and we're going to say they all belong to us. Now we take the prophets. We take Jesus, but we'll call him a prophet. We'll take everything you have, but we'll say we'll make it, and we're better. We've got more. That's exactly the spirit of Ishmael. That's the whole mystery.